A most wonderful good morning, everybody. Wherever in the world you are, it looks like the live stream is working, and we are going to do a really interesting topic today, which fits very nicely into the topic that into the statistics for the BI 308 module. So I hope everything goes out all right. So if there's anyone out there, please do let me know if you can hear me, if the stream works, if everything is set up all right, if the sound is working, and if everything is good. I hope that you are all safe and that the conditions are not too horrible. Marina, thank you very much for telling me that it's working. I hope you are safe and it's not too much of a disruption. I mean, we are in totally unprecedented times, and we are really all learning as we go along. But I think we will get out of that, and hopefully we will learn something from it. We probably learn how to value people more who provide us with essential services. Key workers, doctors, nurses, and I think they are true heroes now. So, looks like it's all going well. And we are just waiting a few more minutes so that people can join. And hopefully the dogs go out. I need to get them out because if they start barking, then all hell breaks loose. And that is still working, yeah. So I just check occasionally that the stream hasn't frozen. I need to get this out of the way. Yep, good. So that's sorted. 11 people are already watching. So hello, everybody. Great to see so many already. We are starting in about 5 minutes, because that's still, there needs to be a little bit of normality still here. And that is the rule of the University of Kent, that we a lecture start 5 minutes past the hour. So that's a good thing, if we can keep a little bit of normality. I mean, how is everybody doing? How are you finding all the sort of self-isolation and social distancing? How are you coping? Is it bearable? Oh, 21 people signing in. It's all right. Yeah, not too different from your usual schedule. That's interesting. I mean, of course, it's. I'm glad that things are not too horrid, and that people are safe. Good afternoon, Camille, or good aftermorning, or whatever. Depends on where in the world we are nowadays. It's really quite interesting, and what I think what we will get out of it is probably that we can deliver teaching maybe in more creative ways. So perhaps what we learn from this horrible pandemic is that education is perhaps more than just sitting in a classroom and just absorbing what the teacher says. Well, one can dream. So now, obviously, we are doing some statistics today. And for those of you who are watching now, it might be a good idea. I mean, it's not terribly taxing what we are going to do. It's just a little bit of percentage calculations. But it might be a good idea if you have pen and paper, because then you can perhaps easily follow the things that we are going to do here. Then you can then do these things hopefully in future yourself. So get a pen and paper, and if you really want to push out the boat, get a calculator. So just a couple more minutes. Does it still work? Yep. I had to ask my children not to do a lot of watching YouTube. And good afternoon to you. Because I obviously need all the bandwidth that I can get from my home office. But the nice thing is that I can have a cup of tea and some Doritos. Hehe. Good afternoon, Bob. Oh, it's just boring. I think I had them on a plate. It was the heat wave, so they're really nice. It's going to be my lunch later with guacamole and salsa and sour cream. Yeah, I think that's good. Gamer diet, yep, best flavor. Love it. Absolutely right. That's, one has to do it. That's, if you can't do it now, when can you do it? Okay, now, shall we get started? Yeah, I think. Let's do it. Let's go for it. So, a most wonderful good afternoon, ladies and jelly beans. The usual greeting, and we need to keep the traditions going. There needs to be a little bit of normality in life. Because we are stronger than this stupid virus. Of course we are. So in the session today, we are going to discuss a little bit conditional probabilities. We will discuss specificity versus sensitivity of a clinical test. We will also touch on what is generally known as predictive values. And these topics are all quite interesting for people who are actually thinking about going into medicine. And there has been a statistic, people did a little bit of a test with GPs and consultants, and it turned out that a lot of people actually found this kind of problem questions quite challenging, actually. So I think 3 out of 4 GPs got this question that I'm going to pose they didn't get it right. Now, before I get started, those of you who are doing the BI 308 module, please try to complete the quizzes for this module. It counts for your coursework. And I think the deadline is Sunday, the 5th of April. But I'm fully aware that sometimes people are not able to do all the work for whatever reasons. If there is a problem, please send me an email and I, of course, will take that into account. You will not be penalized because we are just in this horrible situation at the moment. Okay, so if you have problems with your quizzes, let me know and I'm sure we can find a way around that. Okay, so now here is the question. And I think it is very topical, this question. A disease, this could be a virus or any other disease, a disease affects 1% of the population. So we've got 1% in the population. And the good thing is a good test exists that can detect 90% of the people who have the disease. And it also, so it means if you have the disease, the test will be positive in 99% of the cases. It also correctly identifies 95% of the cases who are disease-free. So in other words, if you don't have the disease, the test will be negative in 95% of the cases. So now in a routine procedure, routine testing, mass testing of people, you find that your test result is positive. And of course, this is something very concerning to a lot of people. And the big question is, are you worried? How worried should you be? So just a quick question to the audience, the 43 people who are watching now. If this was the case, 1% of the population has this disease, 99% of the test positive if you've got the disease, 95% negative if you don't have the disease, your result is positive. Are you worried? Just put down, yes, I am worried, or no, I'm not. Let's see if we get a sort of poll together. Are you worried if you get a positive result? Yes. Yes. Hella worried. Yes. Oh, Richard says no. Yes, 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 I'm worried. Richard, why are you not worried? Is this sort of a philosophical thing? I'm not worried about anything. Still high negative proportion. Oh, I think Richard is onto something here. So hold that thought, and Richard, don't tell people what actually the outcome is. Because hopefully by the end of this session, you will find that yes, it is worrying, but actually it is not that bad actually. And how do we address this question? Now, in the last session, we discussed chi-square test, and I showed you this concept of a 2x2 matrix. And that again is something that we are going to use in this case. But before we get started, let's do a sort of a decision tree. So let's in a way figure out what our actual numbers are. And for ease of calculation, Let's say we just simply deal with a population of 100,000 people in the first place, because that makes it much easier to do calculations. So we have 100,000 people, and we know that 1%, let me write this somewhere here, so 100,000 people. That's our starting population. And we know that 1% of this population has the disease. So 1% of 100,000, that gives us, I think, if my maths is correct, that gives us 1,000 people who have the disease. It also means that 99% of the population don't have the disease. So that would be 99,000 people who don't have the disease. And we see 1,000 people and 99,000 people. That gives us here our 100,000. This number, 1%, this has a name. This is actually called the prevalence of the disease. Prevalence of the disease. It tells us how many people in a population are actually affected. Okay, so we also know that the test is 99% positive if you have the disease. And the dog disagrees with me, but the dog is wrong. So if you've got the disease, your test will be positive in 99% of the cases. 99% of 1,000, what is that? On your calculators, what's 99% of 1,000? Yep, absolutely right, Bob. 990 people test positive. Rita, yep, absolutely right. Excellent. Emma, good. How many people then test negative for the disease? Katie? 10. Ben, 10, yeah. Absolutely right. So we've got 10 people who have the disease, but where the test is negative. Exactly. So this is 990 and 10. And if we add these numbers together, again, we get our 1,000 people who are affected by the disease. Now we do exactly the same thing for the people who are not affected, and we know that if you don't have the disease, the test will be negative for 95% of the people. So, what is 95% of 99,000 people? 95% of 99,000 people. On your calculators, let's see who can do. Good. Good results. Now, I'm very pleased that you get that, because that means that my calculation was correct as well. So we've got 94,050 people. Oops, I got that in the wrong place. Should put it actually here. 94,050 people have a negative test and they are not affected by the virus or whatever disease. And now we can also calculate how many people test actually positive but don't have the disease. So what would you get for this number here? For not disease, but a positive test. Rob, Camille, Aaron, yeah, absolutely right. Fantastic. So we've got 4,950 people who don't have the disease, but test positive. 9,050, how did you get that? Because what we get is, if we add them up, 4,950 and 94,050, we end up again with our 99,000. Okay, good. Yeah, that was a slip of the finger. Right, fantastic. So we now have our numbers, and with that we can actually draw a 2x2 matrix. So what we can do is we can say, right, we have disease, positive, negative, and we have the test result, positive and negative. I have to scroll it a little bit, sorry. You might, yeah, we can see them all. So, and all we need to do is now fill in our numbers. So we had 990 in this cell here. 990, that means disease positive, test positive. We also had disease positive, but the test negative, that was 10. We had test positive, but disease negative, that was 4,950. The last number was 94,050. So this is our 2x2 matrix. And what we can do is we can, like I showed you last week, we can calculate the grand total. So here we know that we had 100,000 people. That's our grand total. And we can calculate the margins, or the marginals. So here we have 990 plus 10, that gives us 1,000 people. These 1,000 people actually have the disease. And if we do it the other way around, we can say 99,000 people don't have the disease. The D and T variables. Oh, this means disease and this means test. That makes sense? I should have put that down better. Okay, so now how many people are actually testing positive? Well, we just add this one and this one up, and we get 5,940 people who actually test positive. And we get 9,460 people who test negative. And again, if we add up the numbers in this column here, we get our 100,000 people. Likewise, if we add up the 1,000 and the 99,000, again, we get our grand total. So everything that we've done right. So this is now our matrix. So let's define a few terms. And maybe I need to introduce you to a different way of writing. So We want to calculate a probability. Probability that, let's say, probability you test positive if you have the disease. So you have a positive test if you are D+. So, and we can write that, instead of writing it in such a long form, we can write this in a slightly different way. We can write probability that your test is positive, so plus t, it means test is positive, given that plus d, given that you have the disease. And this is usually abbreviated as, instead of writing this given that, you write this as plus t, and then you indicate this given that with a vertical line, which means given that you have the disease. So, what are we looking for? We are actually looking for all the people who have the disease and who test positive. So let's see what we have here. So all the people who have the disease, so these are these guys here. So, and we can write a probability as a number divided by the total number. So we are looking at all the people who have the disease, and these are 1,000 people. How many of these people test positive? Well, that is 990 people. That is this number here. 990 divided by 1,000, and that gives 99%. And that is actually exactly the number that we started with, that we were given. This number for this particular constellation, plus t, given that we have the disease, this is also called the sensitivity of the test. Sensitivity of the test. Does it make sense? Brilliant. So Bob is happy with that. Thank you, Rita. Great. Now let me just quickly remove a few things here. Okay, now let's do something funny here. Let's write it in a slightly different way, and there's a twist to it. So stay with me. Let's do it like plus d, given that you are plus t. Actually, no, I don't want to do that still. I don't want to do that yet, because I want to keep that as a sort of a cliffhanger. Wait for it. Let's do it the other way around. Let's say we write, I want to find out this one here. What does that mean? I want to calculate the probability that, what is this probability? How would you phrase this? Minus t line minus d. Camille, absolutely brilliant. Just simply forget about the question mark because you got it absolutely right. So, really, and quite a number of you got it right, it is the probability that the test is negative given that you don't have the disease. So, how do we find this? Okay, we start with we don't have the disease. So, this now, we don't have the disease. That is now our world. That is what we are dealing with. And the test in this case is this one. So we can calculate that as 94,050 divided by 99,000. So 94,050 divided by the 99,000. That gives us the probability. And what do you get for that? Yep, Aaron. Come here. Yep. Absolutely right. So this is 95%. This is actually what we had earlier in our question. This is here. It correctly identifies 95% of the cases who don't have the disease. And this also has a name. This is called the specificity of the test. So, the 99%, that was our sensitivity, that's the plus plus. The specificity is the minus minus. Make sense? Happy with that? So, here we had P, probability, that our test result is negative given that we don't have the disease. And here comes the big step. Here comes the big step. I want to calculate what is the probability that I don't have the disease given that the test is negative. So, try to have a guess. have a guess. What is the probability that we don't have the disease given that our test is negative? What do you think? Be brave. There are no wrong answers. It's a trick question. Here we said that is 95%. Well, actually, I don't have to write anything because Camille already has put it perfectly down. We are dealing with 94,050 divided by 90. Where am I? 94,060, which gives us 99.99%. How did we get this? Instead of, let me just quickly remove some things here. What we are looking at now is we are looking at all the people who test negative. So we are now going in that direction. And if you like, our world, all the numbers that we are looking at is this one here. And this is the number of people who test negative for it. So that is why we get 94,050 divided by 94,060. Does that make sense? You perfectly nailed it, so I don't really have to ask you. But what I want you to appreciate is, if you look at it, we have minus t given minus d gives us 95%, but if we turn it around, minus d given minus t gives us a different number. And that is where a lot of people really struggle with this concept. It is not, you can't turn things around, you can't commute it. It's not commutable. Because in one case, we went down the column this way, and in the other case, we used a row and went down that way, and we get different numbers. So that's something that you really need to bear in mind if you want to be better than the GPs and consultants. So let me remove these things. Okay. So this number here, this 99.99, also has a name, and it is called the negative predictive value of the test. So it means it gives you a lot of comfort, actually, because you know that you are 99.99% sure you don't have the disease if your test comes back negative. Now let's do it the other way around. We said earlier P, probability that we get a positive test given that we have the disease. That was our sensitivity, and that was 99%. Now let's do the whole thing and see if we turn that round. Because that is really the worrying thing. This means, what is the probability that we actually have the disease? So we have disease, we have the virus, given that the test result is positive. So the doc says we have a positive result. How worried should we be? And people are coming in with things. Fantastic, fantastic. Guys, you really get it. You really get it. Brilliant. So, let's have a look. We say we are positive in the test in the first place. So, where is it? So, here we are positive with the test. That's this one here. So our world is made up of these 5,940 people, and 990 test positive. So 990 divided by 5,940, and if you put that in your calculator, it would be 16.7%. This also has a name. This is called the positive predictive value. Or PPV. The negative predictive value is also abbreviated as NPV. What does this result actually mean? This result tells us that if your test result is positive, if test result is positive, your chance of having the disease is less than 20%. It's less than 1 in 5. So life isn't over if you test positive, because under these conditions it's less than 20% that you actually have the disease. Does that make sense? And again, you see, we get very different numbers. We have all plus, positive test, positive disease and positive disease given the positive test, but the outcomes, the numbers are very, very different. And therefore, when people said at the beginning, so the false positive rate is about 83%, you're absolutely right. I would not know what the actual numbers are because I've made up these numbers here for the ease of calculation. But you're absolutely right, Eleanor. The false positive rate is 83%. 83% with the plus the 17% that we have, that's the correct positive, 83% are false positive. That's basically exactly what I just wanted to say. So now imagine you have a test, and actually these test data are not really bad. But if you did this test, let's say there was an epidemic or a pandemic about, and you tested a lot of people, 83% of the people, of tested people, of people who test positive, are absolutely free. 83%. It is just around it. I know that only roughly 17% of the people, so this one here, so 17% of the people, I round it a little bit, 17% of the people who test positive actually have the disease. That means 83%, 100 minus 17, who test positive don't have the disease. So 83% of people who test positive don't have the disease. Brilliant, Rob, brilliant. What this test basically says, it's not that you have it, it says you're not carrying it. Yeah, because that is what we get from our NPV, from our negative predictive value. And therefore, if the test is expensive or time consuming or takes away resources, it doesn't do a lot really in this case. It just shows you that you don't have it. Now, there's one really, really important caveat that I need to make. Something that I did not tell you in the first place, or did I say that? Yes, I did say it. And the word is to look out for is routine procedure. What we assumed is that we have the disease doesn't show. Disease does not manifest itself at the time of testing. At the time of testing. So we don't know at the time of testing whether a person has the disease. Then we can use our calculations. And as Rob really said, the test can demonstrate that you are not carrying the virus. It is a total game changer, however, if we already already know somehow that somebody has the disease. Then we just simply can totally forget what we have seen, because then the test is simply used to confirm. But if we don't have this prior knowledge, so that would be prior knowledge. If we have this prior knowledge, we would get very different outcomes. I should not abbreviate. Very different outcomes. Only if we don't have this knowledge at all, that somebody has the disease, then we can do our calculations, and we would be, mildly concerned if our test result came back positive, but with this calculation we would know that we are probably pretty safe. We have less than 20% chance of actually having the disease. But if we already show symptoms of it, then, and we get a positive test, then this is a total game changer, and this is really then a confirmation. Especially we use that sometimes when the symptoms are not terribly specific. So for example, if you've got a dry cough, a headache, and a high temperature, it could be a lot of things, right? So, but if the test then comes back and is positive, well, then you might be slightly more worried. But if you don't have any symptoms and you get a positive test, well, again, should you be worried? Not terribly. Should you go in the current climate into self-isolation and social distancing? Absolutely yes, even without any tests, because that is the right thing to do. It's not so much about you, it's about the other people who get ill. And unfortunately, I had to talk to a few students who really didn't get the concept. They said, oh, we are young and healthy. And I'd say, yes, and you are an idiot, because it's not about you. You might not be terribly affected, but if you do have the virus, then you must stay at home, because you can pass it still on to other people who are not so lucky. And therefore, if you don't do the self-isolation thing in the current situation, I consider you as a deliberate killer. Sorry if that is really harsh, but I think that is how I see it. Right. Any further question? Did this make sense, this calculation? And I think what I forgot to mention, that what we call something like this, if I write it like that, this is actually called a conditional probability. Conditional because we calculate a probability for this one on the condition that this premise is correct. You're absolutely right, Richard. They are fancy terms. If you are thinking about going into medicine, these are the terms that you would need to learn. And I think in some tests for graduate entry or something like that, they are used in these tests. So they will give you a scenario like I did here, and they will say calculate the NPV and the PPV, or calculate the specificity and sensitivity, which of course in this case here, you don't need to do a lot of calculation because you've been already given these things. So prevalence, this here is the sensitivity, and here you've got the specificity. I certainly am not going to ask anything like that in an exam, although in previous years I couldn't resist the temptation, but I'm not going to ask anything like this in an exam because the circumstances, I'm fully aware that only 40 people watched this live stream. Hopefully we get some more people watching later, the recorded versions. But, you know, I thought this is just an interesting topic, especially in the current climate. And hopefully you learned something and you found it useful. So thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, just let me know. Email me a message or leave some messages here under the video, and I will try and answer them. So thank you very much, and I will now move back to my Doritos and enjoy lunch. So wherever in the world you are, please stay safe. Please make sure that you are okay at all times and have a good time despite the self-isolation and the social distancing. Take care. Bye-bye.